So before we get started, I do want to mention that we've had some technical difficulties today. So I'm on a laptop instead of like my regular desktop setup. So I do apologize if there's any like technical difficulties or if there's any problems with the presentation and kind of going between the presentation and Zoom. If you have a question, please put it in the chat or unmute yourself. That might work better given my circumstances today. But other than that, we'll get started. So my name is Natalie Lezcano. I am the Wellness Coordinator with UFHR Communications and Work-Life Department. And today I'll be talking about Ctrl+Alt+Disconnect, setting healthy boundaries with technology. Right, so let's get into it. Okay, so when we think of the dangers of technology, our minds might instantly flash to sci-fi movies like The Terminator and The Matrix, which depict advanced technology gaining a mind of its own and setting out to destroy humanity. These fears have even gained some attention in headlines recently as artificial intelligence, or AI, has become more accessible through services like ChatGPT, which I'm sure we've all heard of at this point. And so although the threat of technology causing the apocalypse might be far-fetched and something that's only in movies, technology can cause us real harm. It can disrupt our sleep, alter our brain activity, and even create an addiction to our devices if we aren't careful with how we use it. The fact of the matter is that the human brain and body did not evolve with the constant glare of computer and phone screens that we have now. Current technology is also incredibly new in the history of humanity, and we are only just now beginning to understand the consequences of constant connectedness on our psychology, health, relationships, and even politics. This means that setting healthy boundaries with technology can help you ensure that your devices are benefiting rather than detracting from your life, because technology certainly does have a role in our lives, especially now in the 21st century, but we just want to make sure that we're using it in a healthy way and not a way that detracts from our wellness. So in this presentation, we're going to describe the harms of excessive screen time in both adults and children. We'll also assess our current technology usage or learn how to assess our current technology usage. We'll also identify strategies to eliminate excess screen time and discuss the importance of SMART goals and habit formation skills in limiting our screen time. So we'll start with the harms of excessive screen time in adults. So scrolling apps on your phone or sitting in front of your computer screen at work for long, uninterrupted stretches of time can be incredibly damaging on your body, and this increased sedentary lifestyle has severe consequences such as obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and many other health implications. The lack of movement and exercise not only affects our physical health, but also impacts our overall energy levels and productivity. You might find that after a long day of like watching TV or something like that, you don't really have the motivation or the energy to do anything else. You may also experience some symptoms of eye strain and neck and lower back pain. Studies have also shown a strong correlation between excessive screen time and an increased risk of anxiety and depression in adults. Constant exposure to social media, news, and other online platforms can lead to feelings of inadequacy, comparison, and a fear of missing out, or FOMO. The constant bombardment of information and the pressure to maintain an online presence can also negatively impact your mental health, leading to anxiety and depressive symptoms. The term doom scrolling was popularized during the pandemic, and many of you may be familiar with it. It basically refers to binging on large quantities of negative news online, whether intentionally or not. And this doom scrolling behavior is highly associated with psychological distress and feelings of despair. I know for myself, I have a lot of climate anxiety, as it's termed. So reading a lot of news on climate change and the implications that it has on an environment, that causes me a lot of distress. So that's kind of my version of doom scrolling. Another significant consequence of excessive screen time is the impairment of social skills. Spending excessive time online can really replace our face-to-face interactions and hinder our ability to engage in meaningful communication with others, which is especially damaging considering that we are humans, we are very social animals, and we really rely on our pack, our group of friends, to keep us emotionally healthy. This can also result in reduced empathy, difficulty in understanding nonverbal cues, and decreased social intelligence, which again, just overall impacts our relationships and our overall well-being. Technology can also disrupt our sleep patterns. The blue light that's emitted by our screens, such as our computers, our phones, can suppress the production of melatonin, which is the hormone that is responsible for regulating our sleep and telling us that we're tired. This interference can lead to difficulty falling asleep, decreases in REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, which is needed for memory storage. So you may also find that when you are spending more time online, using social media, whatever it may be, that you start having difficulty remembering things. And this is probably because you're getting less of that REM sleep. And of course, this can also negatively impact our cognitive function and our productivity and our energy level if we're not getting enough sleep. Lastly, and perhaps most troubling, extensive screen time has been found to alter our brain activities. Studies suggest that excessive use of screens can impact the structure and function of the brain. It's literally going to rewire your brain, particularly in areas associated with attention, memory, and decision making. This can result in reduced cognitive performance, decreased attention span, and difficulties in focusing on tasks. We often use technology to distract ourselves from boredom, but however, boredom is necessary for creativity and imagination. You might have noticed that some of your best ideas happen in the shower. That's kind of like the common joke that you always think of the best things right when you're falling asleep or when you're in the shower. And this is because since you shower every day, maybe even twice a day, your brain kind of goes on autopilot when you enter the shower. And as you just automatically go about, washing your hair, scrubbing your body, you're not really thinking about those tasks, which brings on a sort of state of mental boredom, which allows you to focus on other thoughts and problems instead of what you're doing physically. So that's just an example of how boredom is really important to our creativity and our problem solving. And so when we're constantly trying to erase our boredom by logging onto social media, that can really hinder those brain functions for us. And apart from the physical and mental consequences of technology, privacy concerns are also emerging as social media has become an increasingly larger part of our everyday lives, and social media becomes a lot more effective at tracking our activity. I'm sure you've all felt that your phones are listening to you when you receive ads on Instagram or Facebook for products that you swear you may have only thought about or mentioned to someone but never actually looked up on Google. And this is because social media sites are designed to track our likes, comments, views, and other forms of online activity to predict what will interest you. This means that these algorithms get so powerful that they not only know what ads to show you, they also know what types of content interest you most so that you keep swiping on the apps longer, allowing them to sell more of your data to advertisers and insert more ads into your feeds. This means that reducing your time on social media will allow you to better protect your privacy, identity, and prevent companies from selling more of your data to third parties who really only want to drain you of your hard-earned cash. Next, we'll move on to the harms of excessive screen time in children. So in addition to all the dangers previously discussed for adults, children are really particularly vulnerable to the psychosocial impacts of the internet. So during the COVID-19 lockdowns, we experienced a sharp increase in screen time across all age groups, but primarily in primary age or elementary school age children. This is especially troubling as children who spent more than 7 hours per day in front of a screen were found to have a thinner brain cortex, which is the area of the brain that is responsible for processing information. And children who spent more than 2 hours per day on electronic devices scored lower on thinking and language tests. So one significant consequence of excessive screen time in children is the disruption of healthy brain development. So during their formative years, children's brains are rapidly developing, creating new neural pathways constantly and kind of pruning off the ones that aren't used. And excessive screen time can really interfere with this process. Studies have shown that prolonged screen exposure can impair the development of important brain functions such as attention, memory, and problem-solving skills. So those areas of the brain kind of just don't develop as much as they should in children who are using screens too often. And of course, this will have long-term consequences on their academic performance and overall intellectual growth. Video games and social media are so successful, especially with children, because they toy with the brain's reward system, constantly providing dopamine highs that encourage further use. However, children do not obviously have the self-control systems in place to tamper this obsessive behavior. So basically, technology is creating an addiction in children as they anxiously await the next notification from their devices or the next chance they have to play a video game, whatever it may be. Excessive screen time has also been linked to an increase in ADHD or attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder related behaviors in children. The constant stimulation and fast-paced nature of digital media, especially on apps like TikTok, can overload their sensory system, making it difficult for them to focus and regulate their attention. This can exacerbate symptoms of ADHD and impede their ability to concentrate and engage in tasks that require sustained attention. So it doesn't necessarily give them ADHD, but it does increase those behaviors. And spending too much time in immersed virtual worlds and online interactions can hinder their social development just as it can in adults. This can lead to difficulties in forming meaningful connections with peers, making friends, and may contribute to antisocial behaviors such as social withdrawal and decreased social competence. The content that kids view on the internet can also be very harmful to them, as one survey by the Department of Health and Human Services found that 64% of adolescents are often or sometimes exposed to hate-based content through social media, most likely unintentionally, but they are still exposed to it. And this can include content that could be considered racist, sexist, homophobic, or even violent. There's also a mental health crisis brewing among teen girls who use social media, with the CDC reporting that 57% of young girls reported experiencing persistent feelings of sadness, and 30% even considered death by suicide as a result of social media use. For these reasons, the US Surgeon General, who is the leading public health authority in the nation, has issued an advisory concerning social media use in young adults. And most troubling, children are vulnerable to predators and harmful, inappropriate content every time they have access to the internet. As someone who grew up when the internet was still relatively new, and my parents, through no fault of their own, didn't really realize what I could potentially be exposed to every time I used the family computer, I can attest to how easy it is for young kids to go on to find a website that they shouldn't be able to find. And as much as we try to warn children about what is out there and what to avoid, kids are still kids, especially if they're very young. They won't be able to recognize a virtual red flag until maybe it's too late. And it, of course, would be impractical to never allow kids to use the internet or smart devices because they are a part of our reality now. But it is really important that we are putting barriers in place to protect children's safety when they are on the internet. So how much is too much? If you're here today, it's likely that you feel you or maybe your children may be spending too much time plugged into your devices. I know I certainly feel that way most days of the week, unfortunately. On the next slide, we'll go into the exact screen time recommendations for both adults and children. But first, I think it is important to understand where your screen time is at. In the handout that I will send out at the end of this presentation, there is a time log included so you can track your time over the course of a week on devices. And if you don't want to track it manually, your phone likely has a feature that can show you how much time you're spending on it in a day. And there will also be instructions in the handout on how to access these features if you're not already familiar. So when assessing your screen time, it is important to include every instance you are using an electronic device. This includes work and leisure time. Ask yourself the following questions while logging your screen time. How long do you spend on average using screens at work? What does your phone say about the amount of time you're spending on social media, texting, or streaming media throughout the day? How many movies or episodes of a TV show do you watch when you get home from work or over the weekend? How many hours of video games do you play at night? How often do you check your smartwatch throughout the day? And how long do you spend reading on an electronic device? And if there are any other electronic devices you use throughout the day that are not listed here, make sure to include that time in your log as well. And I also want to mention that although I did include reading on an electronic device in this list, I do not want you to think that reading is bad for you just because you're using a tablet instead of a physical book. Reading is actually super critical to brain health. However, if you like to read in your leisure time, like I like to do, and you are using like a regular tablet, such as an iPad or something like that, to read an ebook, I highly recommend switching to an e-reading device instead, like a Kindle. This is because regular tablets emit a lot of that blue light that disrupts our sleep and puts excess strain on our eyes. However, e-readers are specifically designed to mimic paper and are therefore a lot less harmful to our eyes and sleep. And regardless of what device you use to read, make sure to adjust the font size and light quality to be easiest on your eyes. So once you've logged your screen time over 1 week, you should be able to determine in which areas you're spending most of your time and continue from there and choosing the best strategy to help you disconnect more often. So before we get into the screen time recommendations on the next slide, I would like for you all to select the average number of hours per day you think you are spending on your phone. I'll be launching a poll. So let me know if you're able to see that. And if you could just answer really quickly, given the choices that are there, how much time you think you're spending on average on your phone. Okay. I'm seeing the answers coming in. Okay. All right, so it looks like we're mainly in those 3 to 6 hours on average on our phones. So on the next slide, when we talk about logging our time and really seeing how much, or the screen time recommendations, and then when you take the chance to log your time, think back to what you answered here and see how it compares and if you were right about how much time you're spending. All right. All right. So moving on into the screen time recommendations. And just a note, the recommendations for children here were provided or were taken from the American Academy of Pediatrics, whereas the adult recommendations come from the World Health Organization. So anyways, for children, there should be no screen time for infants until 18 to 24 months of age. However, the American Academy of Pediatrics did note that this does not include video calling. So if you have an infant and you have relatives who live far away who would like to meet your young child virtually, don't be worried about like FaceTiming them or Skyping them, whatever it may be. But apart from that, the APA does recommend no screen time for infants. Children ages 2 to 5 should receive no more than 1 hour of screen time a day. And then after the age of 5, you should work on enforcing consistent limits for media use for children above that age. For adults, the World Health Organization recommends no more than 2 hours of screen time a day outside of work, and to aim for 3 to 4 hours a day without any screens at all. And do not use any screens less than an hour before bed. And I did want to note, I know there are a lot of people who feel that they need the TV on or some sort of sound or light on while they sleep to help them fall asleep. And if this is you, I would recommend trying to use something that's just sound based to go to sleep instead of having the TV on, because again, that light can really disrupt our sleep and affect how many hours of REM sleep that we're getting. So if you do like to have sound, you can try the Calm membership, which is provided through UFHR. And you can find on the UF Work Life website. That Calm membership, they do offer a lot of sleep content that can help you fall asleep better and sleep better without necessarily having to have a TV on. All right, so now we will talk about our strategies to reduce screen time, starting with adults. So firstly, we can start by adopting the 20-20-20 rule for eye strain, which basically means that every 20 minutes, you'll take a 20-second break to look at something 20 feet away. This simple practice can give our eyes a much needed rest, reduce the strain put on our eyes caused by prolonged screen use. And it also just kind of helps you build the habit of, taking technology breaks throughout the day. You can also try investing in a pair of non-prescription blue light blocking glasses. I have a pair of these. I use them throughout my workday. I find them incredibly helpful, especially I already have plenty of eye issues regardless of technology. So I find that the blue light glasses really help. Next, it is also important to prioritize offline activities and hobbies. So identify activities that you enjoy and that don't involve a screen, such as painting, playing a musical instrument, or engaging in physical exercise. And by consciously allocating time to these activities, sorry, I lost my train of thought. To these activities, you can reduce your reliance on screens and find fulfillment in other areas of your life and maybe reignite some passions that you may have forgotten about in the midst of everyday life. Another effective strategy to spend more time outside. Nature provides a really refreshing break from the digital world and has been proven to improve our mood and decrease feelings of stress. So you can take regular walks, go for a run, or simply spend time in a park or garden, even if all you're doing is sitting there and enjoying the sounds and views of nature around you. Exercise in general is also a great way to disconnect, and I highly recommend attending an in-person class or fitness group to keep you motivated and kind of have another way to keep you away from screens. And time outdoors and moving around doesn't only have to be reserved for your leisure hours. You can also ask your in-office coworkers if they would like to take walking breaks throughout the day together, or you can ask your supervisor if you can have your one-on-one meetings outside, either walking or sitting down somewhere comfortably. So you get the benefit of both being outside, being away from screens, and also moving. Implementing time tracking apps or setting screen time limits on our devices can also be highly beneficial. I'm a big fan of this. I use time limit features on my phone for all of my social media apps. These apps can help raise awareness of our screen time usage and provide reminders when we exceed our allocated time. By actively monitoring and regulating our screen time, you can work on gradually reducing your dependence on digital devices. You can also take advantage of do not disturb and focus features on your device that will limit the number of notifications you receive during a specific time, period of time in your day. So for example, my phone goes on do not disturb at 10:30 p.m., which is around the time that I start to kind of wind down for bed. And that has been really helpful whenever I get notifications from social media or text messages. I don't hear them, so I'm not tempted to look at my phone again. And if the phone's not constantly calling your attention, then you just won't use it. Establishing screen-free zones in your homes can create boundaries and promote healthier habits. You can designate specific areas such as the bedroom or dining table as screen-free zones where digital devices are not allowed. This creates opportunities for quality family time, improved communication, and better sleep hygiene. Multitasking on your phone and other devices while trying to complete another task is also a big problem. For example, a lot of people may like to watch TV while they eat. However, this can really lead to mindless eating, which leads to a whole bunch of other problems such as overeating, weight gain, and just not enjoying your food in general. So instead, I recommend, eating with others if you're able to, or reading a book or doing something else that doesn't involve screens instead of trying to multitask and do multiple things at once. Okay. So how to reduce screen time in children. So you can use a lot of the same kind of strategies mentioned before, but most important is to just be a role model and really encourage your children to engage in alternative activities, especially if there are activities that you are doing together, like playing board games, going for walks, cooking, or just having a meaningful conversation. These activities not only strengthen your bond, but also demonstrate that there are enjoyable things and hobbies that you can do beyond screens. Denying access to screens in the bedroom is also crucial. Bedrooms should be designated as screen-free zones, which will help promote healthier sleep in your children and prevent late-night screen use when you are not able to monitor them as closely. You can also utilize parental control features and apps to manage their screen time and to set limits on what sort of content that they can view while using these devices. And in the handout, there will also be directions on how to access these features for both Apple and Android devices. And it's also important to maintain consistent practices to ensure that your child does not surpass screen limits. So just set really clear expectations, let them know ahead of time, give them reminders as to, we're going to put the phones away in 10 minutes, or we're going to turn off the TV in 10 minutes, kind of preparing them for it to hopefully, avoid tantrums or just to, make those expectations clear so that they know what's coming. And of course, just closely monitor the content being viewed by your children, regularly review the apps, websites, and videos they access, and keep an open line of communication with them and discuss the importance of being responsible and safe online. So all these strategies are well and good, but it is really helpful to have SMART goals, which can really help you to define what you want to accomplish in terms of your technology usage. So SMART goals basically create a five guidelines for creating goals that you'll actually accomplish. So first, there is being specific, which means clearly defining what you want to achieve. Secondly, is measurable, which means establishing a way to track your progress. Next is that goals should be achievable. It's important to set realistic and attainable targets so that you are actually able to meet them and you don't kind of get discouraged when you set an unrealistic goal that you aren't able to achieve. Relevance is another a crucial aspect of goal setting. Basically, this means that our goals should align with our overall objective or bigger picture, which means just understanding the reasons behind your desire to reduce screen time or whatever your goal may be. This could be like improving sleep, fostering healthy relationships, or increasing productivity, but it will essentially work to keep you motivated and focused on the goal. And lastly, goals should be time bound, meaning they should have a specific deadline or time frame, because it's easy to say one day I'll stop using social media, but it's a lot more effective to say at the end of this week, I will be using social media 30 minutes less than I did last week, something like that. So an example of a SMART goal would be, I will spend 30 minutes fewer on social media every day to finish reading my book by the end of the week. So this is specific because you're saying exactly what it is you want to achieve. It's measurable because you have the 30 minutes fewer. That's very easy to measure.
How are you? Yeah, it should have about 5 more minutes. So it's supposed to end at 12:30. I'll come find you.
Yeah, we're almost done. There's only one slide. Okay. All right, and then we just want to, so in creating new habits that stick, obviously, if you've been using technology for a while, you've kind of subconsciously created habits that you're now trying to break. So you kind of have to be more conscious of how your habits are formed. So you can use these simple tips to work on creating new habits. So the first would be to start with small manageable steps. So basically don't try to take your screen time down from 4 hours to 0 in 1 week. That's not attainable. It's not realistic. It's not any of those things we just talked about in the SMART goals. Instead, you can say, I'm going to spend only 45 minutes on social media today or this week. And then next week you can be like, all right, now I'll only spend 40 minutes and kind of just decrease it gradually from there. You also want to make your habits obvious. So if you want to focus on your hobbies more than your phone, you can place objects related to that hobby in your line of sight. So you can place, if you want to read more, you can place a book on your bedside table or on the coffee table in front of where you usually watch TV. You can also try designing a supportive environment by decluttering excess devices or hiding your TV and game console or whatever other device in a closet until you really want to use it. And it might sound kind of extreme, but when things are out of sight, they're out of mind. This also works for your digital environment as well. So for example, I rearranged my home screen on my phone so that all my social media apps were hidden from me, and I'd have to do a couple more swipes to find my social media apps. And just that small practice has helped me use Instagram less often because, again, out of sight, out of mind. You can also try employing habit stacking. So after logging out of your computer at the end of the workday, which is a habit you already have because it's something you have to do at the end of the day, no matter what, you can also disable Teams or Outlook notifications on your phone so that you're not tempted to look through messages or emails at the end of the night when you should be getting ready for bed. And also make sure to emphasize consistency over intensity. So if you start one more episode of a show than you planned and you feel bad for kind of failing on that part of your goal, whatever it may be, and you can just, instead of kind of beating yourself up over it, you can decide to just stop with that episode instead of continuing to binge. And then the next day work better at not exceeding that limit that you've set for yourself. All right, so the key takeaways I'd like for you to take away from this presentation is that excessive screen time can have harmful physical, psychological, and emotional effects on both adults and children. Children under the ages of 5 should never exceed more than 1 hour of screen time a day, and adults should not exceed more than 2 hours of leisure screen time a day. Tracking your screen time is essential to determining how much of your technology usage you should change. And strategies to reduce screen time include prioritizing hobbies, participating in more physical activity, utilizing app timers, and many more. And implementing principles of habit formation and SMART goals can help to successfully limit screen time. All right, so that is all I had for you today. What questions do you all have, if you have any at all? Tyler did mention using noise machines or setting timers on devices so they aren't on all night. That is a great tip. I have a HomePod myself and I have it set up so from 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. to 12 p.m. it does this like night sounds, which really helps me to fall asleep. It also works as like a brain trick to, once I start to hear that sound, I start to get sleepy because when that sound comes on, I sleep. Are there any other questions? I will also upload in the chat the handout that I spoke about. Will asks, are there any tips for reducing the amount of screen time you need at work? So work is a little bit difficult. That's why I kind of avoided it in this presentation because, of course, you know, if your work is on a computer, what can you really do? You have to work, right? So I did recommend going on walking breaks with your coworkers, maybe asking your supervisor if you can do your one-on-one meeting. If it doesn't require a computer, doing it as like a walking meeting or an outdoor meeting, just so you're away from screens. I also really recommend during your breaks at work, not to just like pick up your phone and start texting or scrolling social media. Maybe bring a book with you to work so you can read while on your lunch break. Or coloring, journaling, anything else that you like to do that is not necessarily like on your phone, on a screen, so that on your breaks at work, you can kind of get that break. Carmen also says activating the night light on your computer to reduce blue light. Yes, that is also really helpful. And then I will upload that file now with the handout. And of course, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And the handout is now in the chat if you'd like to download it. And if you'd like to see any of the other resources that are available to you as UF employees, please make sure to check out the UF Work Life website. All of our wellness resources are under the Get Healthy and Get Support tab, I believe it is. So yeah,